to host Theodoros Galanos, Generative AI leader at Oracon. This is the third time I'm hosting in, and every time we have like super deep technical discussions on AI, AEC. So I'm very glad to have you back on the show, Theodoros.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting. It's going to be a fun chat.
Yeah. So can you share in 2024 what kind of AI research work you did, what kind of applications you built?
Generally, it was a wide spectrum of things, and I think just like most people and most enterprises or most organizations, it included everything from the first type of application that people think of, which is a kind of RAG application, Retrieval-Augmented generation, where you use your enterprise knowledge to do specific tasks or even just retrieve the information, the right information on the right time, all the way to data generation, synthetic data generation, agentic automation and workflow automation in a way with GenAI. It's a big topic right now. Everyone is discussing is it agents or workflows, and the answer is yes. And also like some more, let's say, cutting edge stuff like multimodal understanding, some reasoning techniques in a way like mirroring the test time compute stuff that we saw lately with O1 and DeepSeek and other models, and just experimenting in a sense with what these models can do. And I think like there was a lot of experimentation around the LM side, the language model side, a bit less on the multimodal side, but that's the focus of the next year a lot, I think, for me, because yeah, everything we do is multimodal. So everything needs to take that into account. Yeah. And
I
yeah, pretty much those are we can discuss some details, I guess, around those, but yeah, it's pretty expected stuff, like for the most part. But there is a lot of value in that. And again, if we discuss agents, there's a lot of thoughts I have about how much value you have in the low-hanging fruits there.
And when you started in 2024, might have a roadmap or plans of things to do by the end of the year. What were some like surprises in terms of AI developments along the year where you thought, okay, might have to pivot, this is new cutting edge, and I might have to integrate that work in the current
Yeah,
roadmap?
yeah, I think like the pricing wars in a way was a
Since there's so much rapid development in AI, like every month or every week, there's cutting edge work and how do you, as a leader, prepare strategy? Like, do you plan for a year or do you only plan quarterly because next quarter there will be like drastically different AI models which will come out and you might not build?
it's a good question. Like, I think it's an issue like a lot of organizations are facing right now because let's say the digital transformation or whatever went under that umbrella has happened for quite a few years now. And there was like organization made governance around it, processes and like innovation streams and funding, implemented digital tools or adopted like digital technologies, but always like their sort of timeline was at minimum year, right? At minimum. And even then the strategy was maybe longer than that. And when I'm asked what's the difference with Gen AI, I keep saying like it's tools and capability, right? So it's like the pace on which capability increases has nothing to do with what organizations or even small medium enterprises or individual people I used to do before. So it's really hard to plan on a yearly basis around the technology side, right? So what I do generally is sort of separate. It's almost like a basic principles approach. Like you separate like the main things, the main targets we want to work around or want to focus on, and then so you decouple that. You identify the problems that matter essentially, right? And for you, for your clients, for your coworkers, for your colleagues, doesn't matter. And then that can have a longer duration. And ideally at that level, you put lofty targets. So like targets that would appear like very difficult precisely because of that probability increase, right? And on the level of technology, you have a much faster paced roadmap. Generally, I would say around 3 months was a surprise. I mean, we all expected lower prices or better performance, but that was quite a big one. I think like models kept improving and price kept reducing. And the other thing I think is like we started the year with a lot of focus on fine tuning and domain specific models, which is still there. However, I think a lot of the open source models and closed models kind of made in a way like almost domain adaptation unnecessary. So like any sort of continual pre-training almost unnecessary. These models keep getting better and better. There's no point in competing there and have made a bit fine tuning on very, very last mile fine tuning, only the only thing viable, more or less. Although test time compute kind of changed that. So that was the other surprise. Like we went from the idea of like fine tuning domain specific models is essential to, okay, fine tuning is very powerful, but only again at the last mile and for specific trade-offs. So like cost and latency trade-offs. And then the last surprise with reasoning was that, okay, maybe there is now space for fine tuning around reasoning type of data in domains like ours that are not really there. Even O1 and O3, like they're very good math reasoners and logic reasoners and all these things. I don't think they're very good engineering or design reasoners yet, right? Every 3 months, I would probably reconsider, reevaluate what's the technological landscape out there, what changed, what new partners we can talk to, right? What new technologies we have adopted, all this sort of stuff. It's up maximum, I would say 3 months. In a way, we say we do like work on sprints, right? But if you keep that connected to those complex problems, big issues like and targets, then you have something that grounds you to problems. So that's kind of the approach, I would say. And then, yeah, depending on the capability increase and the technological changes, you might also fine tune or adjust a bit your big problems, like because something new might suddenly have become available to you to solve, right? Or some new opportunity is out there. Like I said, for example, test time compute is actually very nice. Like I think people were testing it before. Like I was also playing around before with API models and parallel compute and all this stuff. But it opens up an area again of opportunities for specific like domains. Because again, these large companies, like it's very hard to build a model that will beat O3 or DeepSeek or Claude or anything like that. But you can build scaffolding and perhaps fine-tune models around your complex use cases, right? So that wasn't available before. And now we have, everyone has to think about how do I integrate it in my roadmap and then in my technological stack, the way technology stack.
And how can one develop that muscle of strategic thinking with GenAI for AEC?
Yeah.
I'm guessing part of it requires, okay, being aware about the latest research, part of it requires the domain. Like, so how can
Yeah.
one
I think that the biggest trap people might fall into around this is that thinking that that's something they need to do. It's not something I do. It's something like a room much bigger and much smarter than me does with me or alongside me. So like it's impossible to keep track and even try to filter what's going on in AI across all the domains and all the. It's just impossible. The pace and volume is insane. So what I have is actually many years of investment in very valuable, very good filters, which is people I follow, groups I belong into, right? Communities I take part in. Yeah, and friends that I've made and colleagues, all this sort of stuff. That's the first layer. And then the other is just being curious, right? Just never settle in a way. Yeah, never settle around the technology. Always be very, very okay with the idea of like, just deleting something you were spend 6 months doing. That's fine. Like be ready to let go once you see that something else is possible. But yeah, mainly to stay afloat and stay actually at pace, barely. You need very good filters, very good communities. And again, even then, I spend probably hours a day trying to keep up, right? So even then, without that, I would literally be almost like 20 hours looking at things, and you don't even have time to read those things. It's just like cataloging and making a mental note, right? So yeah, you need good filters.
So, piece of advice for firms who might not have access to Theodoros, like people.
Okay, I mean, everyone can. Like these groups are open. You do need to invest time in building relationships. Literally, just interact in ways that are meaningful with others. Like that's what we do always, right? In all communities. But yeah, there's no other way outside putting that work in. Like there's no freelance here, right? Like it's not like, oh, okay, you don't know the same people. Here's a trick you can do to get there. There's no trick. You don't need to know the same people, but you need to go out there. And the hardest part probably for a lot of companies in AEC and maybe in general is that they need to think non-traditional streams. So like the smartest people in the world are in weird Discord rooms and, in unknown anime Twitter accounts. Like they are the people that on first glance, like you would probably, say, what is this? Like I would do. But so you need to sort of open your mind and also open the strategy around how you communicate, your communication strategy, your building your connection and yeah, building your networking strategy in a way. And we've done that for the last year, and it's paid dividends in a major way. Like you can create really good relationships. You can go from having a simple reading group with people that are, experts, absolute experts in the field, all the way to strategic partnerships with, companies around markets. So like there's a broad spectrum of things that you can do. But yeah, there's no freelance. But everything that, let's say, if Theodoros has is good, which I don't know if it is, it's also available to everyone. It's not like, I'm hoarding some good resource that no one else can have. So yeah, but the counterintuitive thing is that thing about different channels, different types of communication, very, very different people, right? They respond to very different messaging. You're not going to find them in your LinkedIn campaign in a way. None of those people are there, right?
So the strategic partnership you did in on a LinkedIn post with in you're working with people who are training foundation models and like in those groups, and I haven't seen it like other companies doing it. So the connections you have and like thinking fundamentally from the dating or pre-training source itself, and like how can you add value? So, if I'm a CXO of, let's say, mid-size or large-size construction firms, how much budget I need for a Gen AI strategy and team? Is it 500,000, 1 million? I don't know.
I don't really know. Like, I guess it depends on the organization and company, but I would say everyone can start quite light in a way. Like, the hardest part, I think, of the budget or investment or how we call it is the human capital in a way. You need to find people that are very, very excited about the technology, willing to like invest time and effort in sort of like broadening the horizon, understanding, and then you need to give them space and time. In a way, that's what I was really lucky to have space and right? And of course, investing. Like on top of that, once you do that, then you need to invest in a team, right? And invest again, human capital, a team that together can sort of work in rapid ways to build, to prototype, and to build solutions. So I think to begin, like you can begin exploration quite lightly, mainly because like I would say maybe 80% of your early experiments, maybe the 90% of your early experiments, it's just an API call you're going to pay 1,000% to do, right? So like the tool is already available to you to do like some incredible things, right? So all you might need at the beginning to start is like time, space, and people who are passionate and experienced, right? Of course, if you want to bring that to like actual products, things that go in production, high quality and like complex problems. So like at the beginning, if a lot of people start and say, okay, let's make a rhyme assistant. Okay, that's what everyone does, right? There's no mode there. You can do it nowadays, probably 10 minutes, very state of the art, I can see, or like, maybe not production, but like for yourself, state of the art, right? So you need to go into complex problems. That's where like real investment comes in because you need like groups of people with SMEs, with domain experts to come together around the problem and build actual solutions. That takes time, patience, and like expertise. But yeah, starting, I think you can start quite light just because like the actual wonder of this technology is available to all almost. If you want to start, you just get an API and want any of these models, probably for free, right? Yeah, but the exact numbers is hard to say. It depends from organization. I will say that that's another issue for generative organizations to find how to fine tune for all organizations because on the one side you have like an incredibly powerful and incredibly cheap technology. It's insane to have even no one for 200. Okay, it's a lot for us, like $200 per month. I would think twice. Like, do I need it? Do I really have fun just for $200? For a mid-size or big corporations, it's like nothing, right? So like on the one side, you have this technology that is incredible and it's incredibly cheap. Even though it gets expensive at scale, it can get like expensive, but to begin and do like even mid-scale stuff is very cheap and it gets continuously cheaper. And on the other side, you have organizational sort of like practices that are very expensive, right? So how do you accommodate for that? So that I think the biggest investment or like a nice investment you can do is also like trying to align those two. How can you work at that pace and in more direct ways to avoid say any additional yeah burden you might have organizational practices right that are not they are not incorrect. They're just not used to work at this pace and at this capacity with such use of access.
What are your thoughts on digital transformation for the upcoming decade? Because
Oh, it's
from what I feel is last few decades transformation was on digitization or data aggregation or old software to new software. For this
yeah,
multimodal foundational world, I think it's a different digital transformation
yeah,
strategy.
yeah. I think like I'm not an expert on this transformation. I'm going to say that first. Like I was part of it. Part of my journey was like a sort of digital transformation, right? Going from Excel to computational design to AI or ML to AI. But I wasn't involved in doing it at an organizational level. So what I will say might be a bit naive or just my thoughts, right? But I feel that I'm not really sure how transformative this transformation has been when we still use the same tools. We just might do it in a cloud environment. So like, and a lot of times that common data environment might be messier than it should be, or like maybe it doesn't have all the connections and then we end up work. So there's still like, even though we went through, and I can imagine many fields probably completely revolutionized and transformed, but I think at the aggregate, it didn't really transform industries. So the main difference I see with AI is that it's an actual step change in technology that will instantly transform a process, right? Like just think of the simplest example that everyone has access to, like, a knowledge system, right? With its faults, with its difficulties, with its like, 70% accuracy, even then you replace a sort of keyword like Google search like, but not so good system that I don't know how many people might use, right? In very often, or how many people might enjoy working with an intuitive, interactive interface that suddenly enables like all sort of generative capabilities. Even that like is an instant step change from one to the other, right? And I think that will continuously happen. The more we apply these models in complex problems around design engineering, the more we will see that sort of step change, right? And it also changes, almost reconfigures the coordinates of the world that we are in right now in that digital transformation landscape. So, for example, a lot of the digital transformation is around data, and you still hear the same things about data. Oh yeah, let's make sure our data is nice and good, high quality. Let's fix our data before we start. Let's organize our data, and it never happens. And it's a futile thing to do because it's just not how the world works, at least right now. And yet, when you bring language models or visual VLMs into this landscape, it suddenly changes, not because these models make it possible to fix your data, but because they allow you to do amazing things without 100% perfect data. Completely sort of flip the thing on its head, right? From looking for technologies to sort of make everything pristine so that we can do things and build things on top. Suddenly we have a technology that is so flexible that, it can deal with a mess in a way, right? And it can work to fix the mess. It can, you can do augmentation, data augmentation. You can have very powerful tools like nomenclature stuff for cleaning the duplication. But in general, these models allow you to also work on top of very, very messy, very noisy data and do amazing things. So, like, yeah, I think it's a really step change in how digital transformation will happen versus how it happened in the last couple of decades or how long it has taken. And we will see that also in productivity a bit. Although I think that's another chat we can have. Although I think people focus too much on productivity. It's a bit of a blind spot. Yeah.
Do you think there are also domain-specific tooling requirement for to make it compatible for multimodal models? And what I mean by, so I was reading this paper on like the blind spot of clips where the way clip was trained and there could be semantically similar images, but it doesn't do VLM fails at like orientation and stuff because this clip score was. And then I was testing this multimodal models on construction details, and that encoder, like if there are 5 details, can't have identify individual one and provide weight. It just aggregates a score. So it makes me think for there might be problems in the industry where we might need to train our own coder. Do you think maybe OpenAI Cloud will have such a better encoder in a year or two that it works for like all the domain problems?
I don't think they will like, unless they really focus on it, they won't have it. And for now, I think they are much more on the general intelligence path than like engineering intelligence or something. There might be other startups or other groups or researchers that try to do it. And yeah, we do need that. So like I said, you do need still domain specific fine tuning. And you're right to say, like, in certain tasks that, like, let's say the representation of information is very different, the requirements of that representation are very different, then we need probably almost foundation models. I don't think we need foundation models. We might need continual pre-training of foundation models. But again, why create a foundation model when you will have Llama 4 multimodal? It's like, 3 billion, I don't know, training or something. So it's going break. Yeah, why would you need like a Llama 4 multimodal model that's gone through hundreds of millions of training versus like just grabbing that and do continual training with the right data, domain specific data and the right representation. Yeah. So I think I agree. Like, there is a gap there. And I think, and you can see when you try to use like any of the API models for multimodality, there is a sort of like dual effect that happens. On the one side, I think if anyone that tries to use it, the first probably response is like, wow, that's really good. I didn't expect that to happen. And I don't know, like, here's a drawing, extract all the components or something, right? Just do OCR. And the models will do like perfectly on that. They'll grab everything, organize it in every format you want. But then you try to make it reasonable drawing, and then you're like, yeah, not really. And it's not exactly what I expected. That gap, that's where we need domain specific fine tuning, and at some point, perhaps the adaptation for the learned training. So yeah, I do agree. I do think that that's what I meant by there is a space. There is a space there, especially around multimodal understanding or multimodal reasoning. So like, I don't think the space is at fine-tuning something that will extract perfect labels from drawings, which many people might be doing. That's useful, but to be honest, maybe already very good with an OCR or like an LLM. Where the difference will come is when you have, for example, some sort of BQA, a complex question about a drawing that you would ask your engineer, and the engineer will have to make some sort of decision based on the expertise, the context, and the project requirements and their experience, and also some sort of intervention potentially in the drawings. So that process, I think, it fits very nicely that reasoning landscape. So I think there's a huge space and opportunity there to sort of train or create data to adapt models to that domain. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think then we need our domain specific chain of thought reasoning data set where, let's say, there's a bridge drawing and then something like, okay, that is a crack. If we just provide the text-based reasoning, it might not get attention. Okay, I found this corner detail in the drawing and put a red mark or like some image token to highlight. So what's a good spatial reasoning data set look like? Or how are we collecting it? How are we structuring?
I think I'm not really sure, to be honest, don't have the answer to this, right? I would expect that, contrary to the language domain, where it's literally a very long chain of thought, right? And back and forth, backtracking, rethinking, reflecting, all this stuff. In the VLM space for design engineering and the stuff, I think what would be really cool, I don't know if it's going to be either needed or good. Maybe model generalize without this. But what I think would be really cool if you interleaved, you literally had a sort of chain of thought on the language space, like imagine like an engineer writing what they're doing, right? And interleave with some sort of structured representation that points to some element in the image. So for example, you would write like, I see from this query that there is an issue in this component. So right there, you would have like a bounding box around the component and maybe a description. And that relates to that component. So maybe, again, some sort of structured representation that relates to another bounding box, perhaps. And, like some sort of interleaving between language, specific reasoning stuff, which will be the bulk of things. Yeah, a structured representation from the image of things that are related. Perhaps it might be like, suddenly doing OCR for this and extracting the right. But I would imagine that should happen in one flow, just like O1, right? Or O3. You should be able to ask something, the query on the drawing, and the model should be doing, let me see. I think that this is related. Here's the bounding box. I highlighted. And this is about this. I see here that it has this dimension or something. Looking back to this, like you should be able to trace its reasoning, its multimodal reasoning in this way. So that's how I imagine it. And I bet people are already trying it. Doing it in this way or other way. And there are other cool things that people do in vision space that maybe they are not directly. So for example, people do counting. Maybe counting is nice, right? People do like pointing, like, okay. And I've tried a bit. It doesn't really work. Again, that's a gap. For another thing they do is like eye gaze, right? Okay, there's no eye gaze here, but there might be like some sort of like, I don't know, neighborhood around spatial neighborhood or something, right? And so like how things are connected and all this stuff. And I think there were models before the VLM LLM revolution, there were a lot of these models like spatial models and neighborhood models and all this stuff. But yeah, I think we need to sort of construct this sort of reasoning traces in the sense. That's my hunch. I don't have any proof of that, but we should be able to know in a few months, I think.
And I was reading Florence paper and they had like
Mm.
special tokens for like bounding box segmentation.
Yeah.
And also leaves me, okay, for our use case, do we just adopt from computer vision world, okay, segmentation, bounding box, scene graph, or do we need some domain specific ontology, or like maybe it's a curve. There is no curve concept in vision,
Yeah.
like some, but we need this.
No, I mean, if you think about it, the only reason we need multimodality, or not the only, the main reason we need multimodality is because we don't have the proper tooling or the proper integration with our actual design tools. So, like when you have a Revit model, you don't really need a PDF extract of that to make reasoning, right? You should be able to do it on the Revit side. And at that point, it's not really a multimodal. Probably it could be a completely language model, probably with a structured presentation or whatever like your Revit or other Bentley or other software is. Nice sort of schema, as you say, maybe a custom schema, an XML or whatever like format. And then you have, so ideally that's what you would do. But yeah, first of all, like the tooling is not there. Second, I think it's also like not easy to think around that. Like, what do you actually include? What kind of metadata? And maybe spatial relationships are still important. So you might still need picture. If not, you would have to actually encode all these relationships with. So maybe the image at that point becomes a more compressed representation than actually the whole XML. But yeah, I do agree that at some point you need to tap into that metadata that is there. So for example, you don't need to have your model OCR, the dimensions. You already have them somewhere, right? You can access them. You don't need to necessarily have your model OCR the connections of components because you should have them somewhere. But then you can still give the model the image so that they can start reasoning that special way. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think it's a bit of a clutch in a way, like using image, like let's say a drawing, a PDF of a drawing at the beginning, and I think there's gonna be a sort of transition from that to finally nice structured data about my design that I have access to, and then back again to like structured data, image, and language in a way. So at the end, we will need all three. Just because the image will help compress stuff. Because again, you need to find ways to compress the representation. And I think, yeah, maybe it's more like, especially spatial relationships is easier to show them. Like this is left, this is right. But yeah, a lot of it's open questions.
And yeah, you just made me thinking like there could be better like accuracy if the context is passed in a text mode or with the tool, whatever tool they're using for dimension or like semantic labels rather than interpreting. So understanding problem could be solved better through extracting more information from the source.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think there is a big opportunity of like tool calling or editability. Like ideally, like okay, this detail doesn't work. Okay, increase the thickness or change the material, and I want that representation back into the compressed space or maybe back into the 3D tool I'm using.
Yeah. Yeah, the tool calling is definitely, I didn't mention, like a layer that will come in. Like a lot of, because again, you don't want the model to do everything. It doesn't need to do everything. I keep talking about this, how we have like an incredible amount of embedded expertise in our tools, right? So like if you hand over your tools to the model, yeah, I think increases this capability by, yeah, not exponentially, but a lot, by a lot. And actually, it allows you to do things that it could never do, right? So yeah, definitely you would add some tool calls. So for example, maybe you work just in the image space, but if there is some inconsistency or unknown, maybe you can call a Revit API or something like that, right? And this API or Bentley API or whatever people use, right? So to just extract information. So yeah, that's when you start having more agentic workflows. Yeah. Before that, first step I would try sort of like just a one shot region workflow, just in case it works. And I think for a range of tasks that can be very valuable in my work in a way. But yeah, once you want to do like more design generation or design adaptation, or, automate those kind of things, then I would add like a lot of tools. Yeah. It's a second layer, the second level in a very old hierarchy. I generate the second layer. First is use. Yeah.
I see a lot of people like I maybe speaking about myself, I was of the advocate, okay, RAG is a low hanging fruit. You should definitely adopt it. But then after doing few projects and I have now a different overview. I'm gonna write a blog soon that 5 reasons why just straight adopting RAG doesn't work because the type of documents require different chunking strategies or different multimodal strategy. So I was curious, like from MVP or POC to production, what has been your realization that okay, it's not as easy? What has been the evaluation system you integrated?
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I think what was that? I used to say this last few months that it's never been easier to create a RAG application, right? But it will never be harder to make it work. And in a way, it's true because it's incredibly hard. Like if you see, there was this paper by Meta a few months ago, cracked like a benchmark about that, right? And it benchmarked like the state of the art technique. So it had Perplexity, Copilot, and a few others. And I think Copilot was the state of the art at 60% accuracy or something like that. And then if you speak with people and you ask them like, is 60% okay? Can I sell this for you to you? Like they'll be like, what? And especially if you go to engineers and you say 60% good, not really. So there are some considerations. So you can go from that. I think that gap from the generic state of the art to the actual state of the art is like domain specificity, right? So you build everything for your task. So and in order initially to make it work, you also do a vertical approach. So you say, okay, RAG is a foundational technology with which I will solve all problems, or RAG is a foundational technology that will exist almost in all solutions I build, right? But these solutions should be much narrower and focus on a specific problem at the beginning to increase and you can immediately increase the accuracy when you do that. That's the first step. So focus vertically. The second step would be to forget about chatbots and understand that like complex problems are not solved by chatting to an LLM. A lot of complex problems are not even solved by language at all, right? And understanding that the second step to improve accuracy is to create complex workflows. And what that means, it means again in the almost like the test time compute approach, but different. And this was before test time compute. It means increasing latency because in a complex problem you don't really care if it takes longer. And especially if you work on new UX patterns, which is incredibly important area that no one works in, and you build new types of user interactions outside of the chatbot area, then you can increase accuracy, right? And that includes like experts driving the loop, not just being in the loop, actually driving the loop and how the whole process of workflow automation is happening all the way to, yeah. So that domain specificity. And then again, like at the end, you probably do fine tuning and your state of the art RAG stuff, like you said, for example, find new ways, better ways to like extract documents, find new, better ways to like represent information, how you cluster the duplicate, how you bring, then, but those, I think, yeah, if you do just those, which people are only doing that, like, oh, new ranking, new duplication, new cluster, you really have a cap. You can only go above. Now, one last very interesting thing that I like about this is that the use case also matters a lot in what sense. I've noticed, and this is a real, let's say, real thing that happened, right? There were two applications, RAG applications, like very, very typical applications, right? Both quite narrow, very specific topics or domains, right? And for very specific audience. And with the same underlying technology, nothing to say that one should be much better than the other. I would expect both to be, and in our evaluations, which is perhaps the other thing that I forgot to mention, of course, evaluations should be there. They were quite equal. And yet, one of them, for the one audience, was really almost nothing worked, right? That was the feedback. For the other audience, it was a lifesaver. And I think that's where another important layer that comes is the user layer and the human layer. And it's also like the user expectations and also like not just the expectations, but perhaps even their knowledge, their level of ability, all this sort of stuff. So on the one side that nothing worked, actually things did work, but they weren't perfect. And for that audience, everything had to be perfect. Why? Because they actually knew most of the information they were trying to retrieve. So they could immediately spot, small errors. So for example, this is correct, but why did it say this? right? And it's true. That's true, right? If I really know the answer and I see an error, even when I interact with models, I will be, Claude, no, this is an error. Let's do it this way, right? On the other audience, the information was much broader, much newer. So they were very, very happy to be like, yeah, this is cool. Let me see and go look it up, right? So I think there is also like a place where retrieval of that kind, sort of like the quick state of the art, but like simple, not very complicated, not like high latency retrieval will have power. And that's like when you're opening new domains or you're opening new knowledge spots or knowledge hubs, right? At that point, I think users are very, very happy to, in 1 second, have a bunch of information that can lead them to the right answer. While in the other domain of people like working for decades and knowing everything or most of around it, they just expect in 1 second the answer exactly they expect, right? Nothing else, right? So there are things and that's where I think fine tuning doesn't work, by the way. That's where my recommendation would be to never fine tune. Like, okay, not never, because again, there are much smarter people than me working on this, like fine tuning for retrieval, fine tuning for knowledge, right? And you can kind of overfit in a corpus and do it. But for me, like if you weren't like the state of the art and really expert, I would never fine tune for knowledge, because how do you do that? There will always be gaps. Okay, I take everything from this corpus and I try to fine tune. And then, or I take a million questions and answers from this corpus and I fine tune. And then someone does another question that is kind of new and different. And again, so like you can do better, of course, than simple retrieval maybe, but on its own you won't. So I would only fine tune to again use it in a retrieval pipeline versus on its own. But when you go to tasks that don't require knowledge and are tasks of like, I call them transformation tasks. So like, here's an input, give me an output. Here's a text, give me a design. In a way, even that complex task, you can fine tune for, because the model doesn't need to come up with like some small bit of knowledge from a corpus. It doesn't really care. It just needs to take one representation, transform it to it, right? So yeah, that's my last comment of like, that last mile, you can do fine tuning in RAG, but like not to replace RAG. And I think that will surprise a lot of people how not good it will be. Again, unless you are at a very top state of the art.
Interesting finding I had was there is a specific type of users who are just interested in the retrieval, not even summary. That okay, I have this information, I want to search this document.
Yeah, that's actually the better proactive approach. Like just plain retrieval is incredibly powerful and very valuable, right? And many times, the experts just need that. We have complex workflows where experts will tell us, it's really nice that you can create a summary or response or something, but even if you retrieve, that's saves us so much time, right? And that's where you need accurate retrieval. Notice that. Again, like, it is a very much a UX and a sort of cultural also transformation issue of like, how do I actually use these technologies to help me do the task? And one of it is like really making sure to communicate that I'm not replacing everything you do with this yet, right? It will happen for many tasks very fast, but at the beginning, I'm not replacing. I'm just helping you, the expert, to do it much faster, right? And hopefully, if you get those systems working, you can create enough data to create sort of, it's a funny word that I will say, expert systems of that type, to train systems that do that, and then you can scale expertise. And that's the biggest. But at the beginning, you create efficiency and productivity with the end goal of scale, just efficiency. But just retrieval is very powerful. And you can use it in many workflows.
Have you experienced dynamic retrieval scoring? Like what I mean by, for example, there might be some queries where, okay, give me summary of this doc. I just need that whole document chunk. I don't need top 3 document chunks of that query. There might be something where I require more. So how do you decide, okay, there is threshold score and but sometimes that default doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, you can create, again, all of that is UX, I think. Like, okay, at some point you can create agentic workflows. In this case, it's not a quote. In this case, it's actually agentic because, like, again, I had a whole discussion recently. Because in this case, you can allow some decision making in your LLMs or whatever models you have to sort of take some decision, right? Of course, you can predefine what the decisions are, okay, but they can say, I see that, I'm not getting anywhere with this, or that's the interaction. The user said, that's not correct. And I tried a few times. So here's the whole document back, right? So I would do it like that. I would create interactions that enable, and that's what I mean by experts in the loop, Because when I started saying that, I think people initially hear experts in the loop, which is not what you want. Like it's the worst thing possible in GenAI. And I know this sounds surprising. It's the worst thing possible because experts would do nothing else but being that loop if you add them experts in the loop, right? We're talking about millions of interactions and prime generations. How are we going to be in the loop like that, right? Driving the loop is completely different. It's like, just like what you said. I want you to search in this space. So for example, you can give them license to choose what space of your knowledge base to search. You can give them license to go back and regenerate things and redo things. And perhaps you can open up these possibilities of like, that's not correct. And then what else can I do, right? And so all of that, I think, is UX in a way. I would enable it as UX. And if you do that, you can break into something that is very, very hard, expert feedback. Expert feedback is incredibly hard. It doesn't scale. Again, if you go at it as I need to capture feedback, you will never get like high quality unless you're OpenAI or something, right? And even OpenAI or Midjourney or everyone else, they get the feedback by offering a feature. So if you build your solutions by giving the user that sort of putting them on the driver's seat, that's a feature for them. Now they can actually leverage what you gave them in many ways, different ways that they think are better. And if you give that, it's kind of like, it reminds me of that debate when I was young in Greece and about driving. I don't know if every country in the world has had that. Everyone said at some point, like, oh yeah, these people from this country will never stop driving. And yet the first year there was a very nice metro system, everyone stopped driving. So it's the same thing, right? Expert feedback, no one will give. They don't have the time. They don't have the patience, right? They don't see the value. But if you provide a system that allows for implicit feedback, because it gives them a feature, it puts them in the driver's seat, they will use it. And you suddenly get a lot of feedback. And right? Oh, okay, I saw that in this query, the user went back, they changed to this area, they used this sort of flow that I gave them. You will immediately find very rich feedback patterns and interaction.